a single person with, I mean, essentially you're taxing landowners, which again, the appeal to history, I don't think is a good argument. But, you know, ultimately when you look at it, most of the businesses, 28 of the commercial ones out of the 58 remain neutral or no change, status quo. But then when you look at it, the thing that stands out to me here, business number 8, I mean, we know that that's Oakhurst, right? So Oakhurst has a lot of acres, and they pay a disproportionate share of the LMD. So are they using a disproportionate share of the services of the LMD? I don't know. But essentially we're saying, Oakhurst, you are paying 5% of the LMD, and you're paying 65% of all commercial contributions to the LMD is paid by one business. Now, regardless of how, you know, how that shakes out, Oakhurst is a critical part of the community. It has a lot of benefit. They pay a lot of taxes. We want them to, I want them to continue as a business, like I want all businesses to continue in the city, because it's healthy for the city to get the revenue and it's a benefit for the community. To the extent that they will pay, like I said, 65% of all commercial LMD and 5% of the total. And then when we look at the risers, just assuming a straight 3% rise, that 60,000, 67,000 goes to 100,000. You know, it's hard for me to say that they are using that proportion of the LMD commensurate with the amount that they're paying. So the other businesses will all get a reduction as well. Essentially, every commercial property gets a reduction, except for the ones that are less than 1 acre, because that would be straight across. So like you could see, several are just probably a fraction of 1 point something acres. And those all are at 607.46, so they're exactly double because you're rounding up, right? But the vast majority will be a little lower, which, you know, could help the business community. But the other one is fairly significant. I mean, we've had conversations with Oakhurst, and the amount of taxes they pay, the amount for their water charges, for all of their things, it does put pressure on the overall viability and the going concern of the business. So that to me definitely is a consideration. And then the other is fairness. I think we always have a chance to look at something, or when we have a chance to look at something and it's in front of us, we evaluate it de novo, like net new, and we just say, does that seem appropriate to have one business pay 5% of the entire LMD? So that'd be my argument in favor of going to everything per acre, or sorry, per parcel. Said the wrong thing.
And then what are you thinking about how to make up the difference if we go to the per?
The 10% makes up the difference.
The 10% makes up the.
It exceeds it. So the 10% on 1.3 is what, 130,000? The declination, the decrement is 85,000. You're still net positive, just net positive a little less.
But the basis for the 10% reserve was to have a reserve, right?
Well, or for one-time CapEx, capital expenditure type spending.
Okay.
So fences on tops of cliffs, things like that.
Vice Mayor Inia, were you going to say something?
I was going to say that 10% is going to last 10 years. So it might come out even the first year, but as the CPI goes up, it's going to be less.
Sorry, I'm not following.
The first year of the 10%, that's for the CPI for the rest of the 10 years, right?
No.
No?
It would just be assessed once to reset the base for the next 10-year period, and CPI would be put on top of that 10%. So it stays there, but it ratchets then, not 10 plus CPI, it just CPI on year 2.
I think it's better not to think of it as 10% per se, but it's just resetting the baseline to a higher number, and that number happens to be, we arbitrarily set 10%. It could be 8 or it could be 12, but we said if you just raise the amount a certain level and then re-baseline it there, and then for every year thereafter, you do it. The benefit of having a 10-year term is that it gives us the opportunity to rebaseline as needed. If prices were stable and flat-ish, just normal in line with regular growth, then you probably wouldn't need to rebaseline. But if there are periods where there's a rapid increase in pricing, how could that ever happen? But if it did, then you would have the opportunity to raise it. And so I think that's what the 10% is supposed to reflect. Inflation is crazy.
So I still, as much as I appreciate that businesses need help, et cetera, I think we also heard a speaker say today that people don't like being taxed. I don't think that there's going to be anyone, well, maybe they would be, okay with saying, okay, well, we'll absorb this from the businesses just to make sure that you guys, the city doesn't have to absorb it. I do believe that if a business paying call it $70,000 a year is what's going to make them not be in business anymore, there's something else going on. And I'm an Oakhurst member. Even though they've lost a lot of members, I'm still a member. That can't be what's going to make them go out of business. And as business owners, that's just, you have bills you have to pay. We, as a city council, shouldn't be helping businesses stay in businesses. We've lost a lot of businesses. Businesses turn over. If that happens, they sell it, we get a new Oakhurst owner. It doesn't mean that it shutters. So I'm not following the logic on us eating $86,000 or asking the residents to incur that cost and absorb it, even if it's a $20 more for them to be assessed. I'm not following that.
Yeah, I think that's not the way that I would think about it or frame it. The city doesn't absorb anything. It's just taxing people less. So the city would still collect a net greater amount than in the year prior. So we're not eating any costs either because there aren't costs per se. We're essentially just taxing people less. And so the benefit applies to all businesses. Obviously it's a proportion of acreage, but I think it would be an inapt comparison to say that residential properties would need to absorb the costs for non-residential properties, because essentially all the money is fungible and we would be collecting a greater amount of money overall.
So earlier during the presentation, I think the questions were asked were, aren't there other ways that we can think about the 86,000 annually, that net, if you're looking at this from these 17 businesses? And are there other options? And I think it was Dennis who shared, yes, I forgot to say this. You gave us a couple options. Oh, hold on, they're not listening.
This is like Survivor over here.
It's okay.
Yes. So let me add another wrinkle to this. Sorry, we were having our own conversation
It's okay, that's
while
why I
you were
stopped.
having a conversation.
Tribal
Bless you.
council is interesting.
Sorry. So if we're going to change the rate of apportionment, I think I mentioned this earlier, but I want to expand that slightly. We have to be able to justify the assessment fee. It's a fee, not a tax. And so part of that assessment is done for us by a company called NBS for the LMD as well as for the Grove Park. And they're gonna have to be able to justify the 10% increase already. That's part one.
That's pretty easy with inflation.
Again, if we're gonna though spec out for CapEx, what's that level of CapEx? I'm not saying that's impossible, but I'm just saying they have to do that work in time for us to put this together by June 2nd. I have a meeting scheduled tomorrow afternoon to have exactly this conversation with NBS, anticipating that this might happen tonight. So I've got it already on the books for tomorrow afternoon. The other piece of this, as we're talking about it, is if you do have the residents absorb that would have to be a part of their analysis as well, that the transfer of the costs from businesses greater than 1 acre would be transferring proportionally over to the rest of the 4,100 residential parcels. That would also have to come out in their analysis as well. I think we can get this done. I'm hoping we can get this done. I'm going to know a lot more at 3:30 tomorrow afternoon about what this is going to take in order for them to do it, because they're already finishing up the report for FY27 for us that I'm bringing on the 2nd that I indicated earlier. So this has to get scored and justified because it's a fee. And I think that becomes key. I don't know if they're going to have to make, I'm going to look at Mala just because this gets a little fuzzy for me. Are they going to have to make a determination that the fee needs to change for the non-residential units? Do they have to come?
I think if you change the formula,
Yeah,
that my concern is, and that's the conversation you'll have tomorrow,
Right.
is whether they can do it in time.
yeah.
If
So,
you, the more changes you make, the
When you say do it, what do you mean?
prepare the report that's going to go with the documents for June 2nd.
Okay.
so that was the thing I learned this morning from our council's colleague, and as we really dug and pulled this thing apart, the change in what is commonly called the RMA, the rate and method of apportionment, that if we touch that, we're having to do the analysis to back up and support whatever the changed RMA is for the district.
I mean, okay. I actually think it's a more equitable RMA than it is now. So be it.
I'm going to go out and say I disagree, like I did at the last meeting. I just don't think that we should, aside from what you just added, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, and you own a business, you pay taxes. I don't feel like any of the businesses should be treated as a parcel or a household. I just don't. And this is something that they've all been paying for 10 years already. It's what they're used to paying. If we're talking about equity, businesses are not households. And I'm going to stick with that. So if to move forward with this, I'm not going to approve changing this to per parcel.
And I'm not going to approve it either. It should stay the same.
And is your meeting going to provide any additional information to us on June 2nd, where if we decide all these other things, we can come back to that on June 2nd?
No, I mean, tomorrow is really about just figuring out how this fits within their work order and how much time they have to do the justification. I'm not familiar with what that would require timing and staffing wise for them, and I can't speak to that until I speak to them.
And cost, right, of doing that analysis?
Yeah.
So can I clarify something that you had mentioned earlier? I wasn't sure I understood it correctly. If we do not change the RMA, does the public hearing and all the other stuff that you mentioned earlier still need to happen?
Yes,
All of that same schedule. So that's
Yes.
required regardless.
yes.
But what's not required is the analysis that you're,
Yeah.
I think there's just less work to do because you're using the exact same formula.
Yeah. So, for example, if we went back up, I guess I can actually do this to show you. So if we look at the language of Measure H that we had on the slide here, right? You'll notice down here, this language where it says, because this was done in 2017 in anticipation of the next year, the parenthetical comment there says, presently 234.84. It's a note that they don't know what the number is going to be next year with the CPI when this happens. And so they put this note in there as the way of saying, this is what the price is now, and it's going to be what it's going to be based on the justification report that NBS is doing.
but this
So-
is this language is the one that's problematic because this describes per parcel and the ordinance is not.
I don't know what you're saying. I don't believe that's true. I believe
So
this is.
this is presently 234.84 per year per residential and non-residential parcel.
Or fraction thereof.
And I think at the last meeting, you shared a different slide that showed this, but then you highlighted it with another page that showed us what the actual ordinance said.
Yeah,
So it
ordinance
had the
said,
ballot,
yeah.
ballot language versus what the
The
ordinance
problem
says.
is the ballot language is in conflict with the ordinance.
The ordinance governs.
I know, the ordinance
Yeah.
is controlling.
You get very, as you know, you get 75 words, so.
Yeah, I know.
You can't,
But, I mean, that meaningfully is different. I'd say that is materially different in the calculation. So if the voters were to approve this as the ballot language, obviously the ordinance is probably, no, the ordinance gets adopted after, right? Or is it at the same time?
it's attached.
It's at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So, well, regardless, the ballot language should be consistent with whatever the ordinance says.
I agree.
And this is not.
I agree.
I just said this was an example from last time.
Yeah.
It's not definitive. We didn't want to draft anything
Sure.
to not prejudice this
That's fine.
conversation.
And that's fine. So like, if I'm a voter and I don't read the ordinance because I'm not a masochist, and I just read the 75 words, and I say, oh, I'm voting on it per parcel, and then I turn around, oh, but you didn't read that part on the bottom, that just contradicts the ballot language, I would feel misled. So, that's just me.
I mean, I think that's valuable input to make sure that there's a greater degree of consistency between what's in the ordinance and what's in the ballot language up to our word limit.
Do hyphens shorten words?
Just don't use spaces.
No, I don't think so. I don't,
Okay.
and yeah,
You can get one of the teenagers to
we can emoji it maybe.
shorten it up a little bit. I need a translator when I read this. Okay, so Vice Mayor Nia, you are not in favor of changing the methodology. Councilmember Tillman, you are not in favor of changing the methodology.
Correct.
Do you have your wish? You go either way. I didn't say that. I almost said that.
It was on your lips, but I just want to say, I'm either way is fine with me.
Okay, and I'm not gonna die on that hill, but I do think it is more fair. But that's me.
Well, and I feel the same way. I'm looking for something a little bit more equitable that is fair to all businesses. If you want to say, we're talking about businesses here, that it's something that is just more equitable. And yes, there is a cost to doing business, but this is like, and it also happens to be a property that, and maybe this isn't the right way to defend it, but that also does all their own landscaping and maintenance, right? Yes, they're surrounded by our beautification projects, our trails, our parks. Dennis? Oh, they were going to say something. So, and I love that we have a golf course. I never want it to go away. So I guess in my mind, I was thinking if there was a way to kind of, and if there was other precedent in other communities, other districts that we could cite, but you do need that answer tonight.
Well, I think in order to give NBS a crack at being able to do the analysis, if there's going to be an RMA change, then we need to give them a fair crack at doing that because we have to make that part of the package on June 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't provide direction, I can't imagine you'd make the deadlines.
No pressure. Okay. Yeah, so there's really no way to isolate because I think we have to treat all the same. So, that's somewhat problematic. I do agree that all the businesses they have to pay taxes. It's the cost of doing business. I mean, but there's a limit, and it wouldn't, if we were to say, hey, instead of 70,000, it's going to be like 700,000, and that's a tax, I don't think we could justify that by saying it's the cost of doing business. I think there has to be some kind of balance in what you pay versus what you get. And that's just the nature of taxes. Not everyone gets, I'm using the term tax colloquially, so not the strict definition of a tax. But that being said, if it is easier for staff and it's easier to get it to lessen the work, I mean, I want to give this the greatest chance of success. That's ultimately the goal. So I would, if it reduces the burden on staff, increases the chance for us to get everything done in time, and it eliminates some other administrative work that will need to be done as a result, then I would just go with what it is.
And cost, if there's additional cost analysis. Dennis, did you want to say?
No, I mean, there would be, to me, in the bigger discussion, it's not that much difference in cost if we were to do the extra analysis. I don't want it to be about the cost to the city to do that.
It's more administrative time.
It's the administrative time. I think it does put additional pressure on our consultants. Even just taking the 10% to add to rebase it, they're going to have to do some analysis anyway. So that's going to be some additional administrative time. But I think if we're doing that, plus trying to create the justification for the shift in the ordinance. So
If they're going to do work on the 10%, just tell them, have you tried to get gas lately?
it should be easy argument. I get it. Easy justification. I get it.
Okay.
And we do have precedent, obviously. These businesses have been paying it the last 10 years, 20 years. We don't know who all these businesses are outlined 1 through 17, but I'm assuming our shopping center.
One of them's got to be Safeway.
Well, and they're in different parcels, so it may be 4, because they're in 4 parcels.
Yeah, that's
Might
right.
be.
Okay, so any other discussion on this? You're okay, like if we just leave as is?
10-year
I
also?
have some questions that are
Microphone.
part of
But
the.
yeah, to turn on your, yeah.
Thank you. I have questions relative to some of the information that's posted in this wonderful report. But there's no decision required on any of them, but it's just clarification for my own
Okay. You want to take that
purposes.
offline? Or
Huh?
you want to do that now, or do you want to
Yeah,
take it offline?
I can do it right now. The exempt properties, City Hall, the library, the fire station, is that what they are? The exempt properties?
Actually, I never even looked them up. So they just come up, they show up on the list
Well, where
from.
do- yeah, how do they show up
from
then?
NBS.
probably
I
is
I
it-
don't
is-
even know, probably post office, the school properties.
Yeah,
It's-
those seem natural ones, and
yeah.
I just want a clarification, because
But
somebody will ask that question, and I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know.
And I just want to be honest with you and say, I did not look at them to figure out what those parcel.
But there are
I-
nine exempt parcels.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other question is, on the population list here, it lists Clayton at 10,683 as of 1/1/24. I've seen numbers fluctuate as high as almost 12,000. And what are we, losing people by the handful here, or what?
So, keep in mind, the census numbers were generated, officially in 2022,
Yeah.
after the 2020 census. What most jurisdictions in the state of California use is the State Department of Finance's population estimates for all the iterative years in between. And so those numbers are based on a number of factors that Department of Finance uses, because it's used as an appropriation method of many state budgets.
Sure, yeah.
So they have
Yeah.
to have a way of saying, this is what the population is for this fiscal year.
Okay, because I just want to, to kind of zone in on a reasonable number to
Yeah.
quote. Because people ask all the time, believe it or not, how many residents are in Clayton? I go, well, there's between 10 and 12,000 people.
Little under 11 grand.
Yeah, thank you.
11,000.
That's all I had.
Okay.
And did we decide on the 10, we did decide on the 10 years?
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't know if we verbally said that, okay.
Okay, so do you have everything you need at this point now for this? Is there anything else that you'd like to raise here while you have us?
No.
Okay? Do we want to discuss take the similar approach for the arguments in favor pending analysis, if we can actually do that? Is that all good?
That works for me.
Okay. I don't think you need a motion, and we already did public comment, so going once, going twice. That concludes item 7A. Next item is adjournment. The next meeting is June 2nd. We are adjourned at 8:56.
Good job.
Well, we gave it a try, guys.
I just think that $100,000 after 10 years, we're gonna have somebody say, well, they do already.
You were here last time and you wanted to know about the sidewalk, right? Do you have questions? All right.
Well, they do.
Okay.
I mean, they do still do, but they pay business taxes. This is in addition to